Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Yeah. Hey there. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I know I only keep
Long time no see. Hello.
Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be back with you today. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to be here. I have opening words for us this morning. These are from This is the Home That Love Made by Reverend Amanda Pape. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love that the founders felt when they planned out these walls and raised these beams above us. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of all who have worshiped here, those who have celebrated and grieved here, the babies dedicated, the couples married, and the family members mourned here. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of our children as they learn and laugh together, and our youth as they grow into their own sense of purpose and meaning. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of the staff who have served it, full of their hopes for this congregation, their hard work, and their acts of dedication. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of the choir, the love made so clear in the voices lifted here together. This is the home that love made. It is full of our love, the love of this community, despite our differences and our disagreements, the love that holds us together as a people. This is the home that love made. Can you feel it? May the love be with us always. Welcome as we worship together.
Welcome, new friends and old. I'm Steve Runyon, and I am a member of the nominating committee that will become important in a minute. And I'm also the worship associate for today, so I welcome you to our service here this morning. We're a spiritual community that welcomes and appreciates the importance of the practice of appreciation and acceptance. We look for ways to empower each other in our spiritual growth, supporting each other through our journeys of birth, childhood, youth, adulthood, and eventually are becoming mentors to younger generations. Being in Sunday worship together is one way that we learn who we are together and as individuals. Worship is for us a time when we share in the spiritual practice of listening to ourselves and to each other. If children, youth, and their families have questions about our religious education program, Nick Walwork is our Director of Religious Education. Our new season of RE programming has begun, and Nick is pleased to talk with you and answer questions about it. If you have any questions about the choir, please talk to our music director, Michael Rosen. Our AV technical director is Alex West. Thank you, Alex. And our congregational administrator, Katie Julich, is here most weekdays and is happy to get your emails. And Reverend Joel Miller is our interim minister. Right now, he's in Rochester, New York, helping his daughter with a move. We are pleased to welcome Reverend Charles Loflin this morning. He is returning as a guest minister to our pulpit today. And we have many announcements in our order of service, online and on your printed order of service here. It's just a few things that I'll call out specifically. The Endowment Committee will be in the Great Hall today for questions about to distribute forms for the endowment grant. And those applications are due on February 18th. The February in-person meeting of mindfulness meditation will be today, February 11th, at 11:45 in room 304. Whether you're skilled or a beginner, you're welcome. On February 15th at 6 p.m., there will be an introductory meeting of a new women's spirituality group in the dining room. And finally, since I am on the nominating committee, I get to make my own announcement, which is that the nominating committee wants you. We're looking for board members and for committee members. The list of exact positions is in your order of service, so please take a look at that. You can talk to any of the NomCom members. I'm going to be at the table by the little round table by the coat room door after the service. So if you want to come by, or at any time, you can send us an email at nominating@muff.org. And just to emphasize, the whole process is confidential, and we do need to have the slate in place by May 2nd to be in compliance with the bylaws. That's the word I was looking for. All right, and now as we light our chalice, we'll say together, love is the spirit of this fellowship,
and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning, everyone. Tim and I were all set, but unfortunately we are having some technical difficulties with the drums, so we were going to play on the first and last song. Yeah, so you're stuck with only me. I'm sorry. Please stand if you'd like.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love above, and so every soul is blessed and whole. The truth in our hearts is our God.
So, I have a question for you this morning. What does it mean to be an ally? Who can give me a definition of an ally? What's an ally? Yes, what's an ally? Someone who's friends with another. That's good. That's really great, right? Anyone else? What might you add to your definition of what it means to be an ally? A supporter. Supporter's a good synonym, right? What else?
A formal relationship that supports the goals and aspirations of the other parties.
Yeah, so an ally, right? A promise keeper. There's some sort of formal relationship. It's like, I'm going to be there for you, and you're going to be there for me, that kind of thing. Yes?
You don't share part of the person's identity, but you're an ally with that person's cause.
Okay, that's a really important one, a distinction that Barbara brings up. So she says that as an ally, you don't necessarily share the identity of the person, right? There may be differences, but you are committed to the same cause, right? That's a great definition. Anyone else have anything they would add to ally? Yes. So an ally is making an effort to understand, right? To really be a part of all that together. That's great. Oh yes, please, one more.
I think there's an element of protection.
Say more, say more.
An ally protects the person, or the person who they're an ally to knows that they are there to stand with them.
Yes, so the idea of protection is part of the ally, right? Because the reason we form allyships is to know that if any of us is under duress or direct attack, we can expect that our allies are going to be there to protect. And hopefully, like you're saying, not only once something has happened, but before something has happened, right? That wall of defense. So allies are great, they're super important. Yes, Marjorie?
An ally is a collaborator. There's some equanimity where no one rises above the others, and they facilitate.
Facilitators, collaborators, all of these are terrific synonyms. Allyship, yes?
Sounds like you don't always know who your allies are.
Do you not always know who your allies are? And it does bring up that allyships often shift, right? So you may be an ally for someone, but not always an ally. Like circumstances can potentially change in terms of how that makes that happen. Well, allyship is super important in the work that we do as Unitarian Universalists and just as human beings, right? We all need allies. But I have another question for you this morning. What is an accomplice? An enabler. An accomplice enables. What else does an accomplice do, though?
A partner in crime.
A partner in crime. Although I wonder if we could just not say crime and say a partner in the effort, right? Because whether the effort is positive or negative, an accomplice is a partner in the effort. Co-conspirator. It comes from accomplish, right? The same root words there, right? There's an end in mind, right? A specific goal. I think that's true. What? Yes?
Someone who's deconstructing oppressive systems.
Oh my gosh. And I did not plant that answer, I promise you, right? But the answer was an accomplice is someone who is deconstructing oppressive systems, right? And that's really what I want to focus on a little bit here in this time for all ages, right? Allies are super important. They are super necessary, and we are sort of accustomed to working in the language of allies. But allies will only take you so far. It's great to have allies. We all need allies. But for the work that's going to change the world, for the work that's going to see systems of oppression and take them on, we need more than allyship. We need someone who is vested in the battle themselves, right? And again, important to say, it doesn't mean we always share the same identities, But an accomplice is more than there to walk alongside. It's someone who is there to work with you for your goal. There is a fabulously beautiful quote. I've used it here before. It's from Lila Watson, who comes from an Australian indigenous tradition. And she says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let's get to work." That's the difference between an ally and an accomplice. An accomplice knows that their liberation is bound up with mine. What we really need, friends, are folks willing to be accomplices. Blessed be.
Every Sunday, we include in our Sunday worship service a time to share and acknowledge significant life events, births, graduations, deaths, and other significant life accomplishments, losses, and changes. Not all the milestones or passages we have experienced will be shared aloud this morning, but we remember in this moment that we need not be alone. It is possible, even essential, that we share our lives with others. It is in our deepest sharing that we all will find our greatest strengths. And we read from gratitude cards submitted too, because when we feel despair or greed, denial or anger, or even numbness or disdain, these feelings can disconnect us from ourselves and each other. Gratitude frees us to celebrate what is good and look for the good and possible in our lives. We share just a few of our many gratitudes as a reminder of the power of this spiritual practice. So we have one milestone today and a few gratitudes. So Beverly Hayes writes that George has been in Morristown Hospital since Monday with a severe case of pneumonia. He is improving, but progress is slow. She'll keep us posted. Thanks for all your support. Thank you, Carrie Davis, for setting up the knitting and crochet circle happening next Sunday after service. Join us. Thank you, Laurent and Alex, for continuing to run the Wi-Fi lines throughout the building. And finally, thank you, Reverend Charles Loflin, for visiting and preaching again here at MUF.
I invite you to join me now in a moment of meditation and reflection. We are coming from different places. We bring our own experiences. So for you, this may be a time of prayer. It may be a time of gentle reflection. It may be a time simply to breathe. However you come here, that is okay and that is enough. Spirit of life, we have gathered once more. We have been drawn yet again to an open flame. We come as we are. We come with all our hopes and our fears. We come with all of our joys and all of our sorrows. We even come with every ounce of our faith and doubt. Why are we here? We are here to imagine. We are here to dream. For some, we are here to weep. Let us hope we are here to listen. What do we long for? We long to be known. We long to be loved. We long to be whole. In spirit, we long to be free. So we gather once more, drawn again to the flame, a community of hope, a community of memory. bless us. Amen.
Just confirming there's no time for all ages. We're going to...
Oh,
Song
sorry,
name.
that
No,
was
it's
me earlier. Did I jump
Got-
order?
No. Although I just didn't want to start the song if that was too premature.
Gotcha.
Please stand if you'd like.
Make channels for the streams of love where they may run beyond. And love as overflowing things fill that everyone. And if at any time we see such channels to provide,
So I have two readings to share with you this morning. The first comes from the African-American minister James Cone, who wrote a foundational book called God of the Oppressed. He says, "Indeed, our survival and liberation depend upon our recognition of the truth when it is spoken and lived by the people. If we cannot recognize the truth, then it cannot liberate us from untruth. To know the truth is to appropriate it, for it is not mainly reflection and theory. Truth is divine action entering into our lives and creating the human act of liberation." And the second reading is adapted from Gustavo Gutierrez's groundbreaking work, A Theology of Liberation. He says, "The theology of liberation attempts to reflect on the experience and meaning of the faith based on the commitment to abolish injustice and to build a new society. This theology must be verified by the practice of that commitment, by active, effective participation in the struggle which the exploited social classes have undertaken against their oppressors. Liberation from every form of exploitation, the possibility of more human and dignified life, the creation of a new humankind, all pass through this struggle. But in the last instance, we will have an authentic theology of liberation only when the oppressed themselves can freely raise their voice and express themselves directly and creatively in society and in the heart of the people of God, when they themselves account for the hope which they bear, when they are the protagonists of their own liberation. We must be careful then not to fall into intellectual self-satisfaction, into a new kind of triumphalism of erudite and advanced new visions. The only thing that is really new is to accept day by day the gift of the Spirit, who makes us love in our concrete options to build a true human fellowship in our historical initiatives to subvert an order of injustice. May it be so.
The offering will go to how it is described on your OOS. Just so you use faith action, yes.
Please give generously. Please give generously. Every bit counts. Thank you. All hail to the days that merit more praise than all the rest of the year, and welcome the nights that double delights, as well for the poor as the peer. Good fortune attend each merry man's friend that doth but the best he may, forgetting all wrongs with carols and songs to drive the cold winter away. 'Tis ill for a mind to anger inclined much mirth and good cheer in every household is had. The country guise is then to devise adventures of winter play. Women, children, and men do the best that they can to drive the cold winter away.
Thank you, Marjorie. That was beautiful. And thank you for your generosity, because in case you didn't notice up on the screen, 50% of your gifts today are being shared with UU Faith Action New Jersey, which happens to be the organization for which I serve as the executive director. We are grateful for the support of this congregation over the years, for the leaders of UU Faith Action who have come from this congregation. We just had our gala yesterday down in Princeton, and you were well represented by some Morristown folks there as well. We are always grateful for the work that you do. The work of social justice is so important, it never stops, and every little bit helps. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So this morning, I want to talk a little bit about education. You know, education has been important historically to Unitarians and to Universalists and to Unitarian Universalists. And we're going to talk more about some of those specifics in a bit, but I actually want to start by digging into just how problematic talking about education out loud can be these days. So I'm going to share some research with you over just how partisan our discussion is around education at the moment. So this is data according to a June 2023 Pew Research Center report. They say that the public is sharply divided along partisan lines on topics ranging from what should be taught in schools and how much influence parents should have over the curriculum. Here are just some of the findings. So overall, 55% of the people who responded said that K through 12 public schools have a positive effect on the way things are going in the country, 55%. A whopping 42% say that the effect of the public schools is negative. But here's the catch. If you break that down by our two main political parties, 72% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents say the effect is positive, with 61% of Republicans and GOP-leaning independents saying it was a negative effect. That's quite a divide. Also, 62% of Democrats say that they have a favorable opinion of the U.S. Department of Education in general. 65% of Republicans see it negatively. When it comes to expressing a great deal or fair amount of confidence in K through 12 public school principals in particular, to act in the best interests of the public, the percentage was lower than it was in 2021 for everyone back before the pandemic, but it is especially lower amongst Republicans. So the overall total went down to 64% from the prior 80%. But if you break that down by party, 76% of Democrats had a great deal or fair amount of confidence in the principles of our K through 12 educational system, and 47% of Republicans had not too much confidence or no confidence at all. When it comes to questions about what children should learn in school, you're not going to be surprised to hear that we are deeply divided alongst partisan lines here as well. For example, 66% of Republican parents of K through 12 students would prefer that their children learn in school, catch this, that slavery is part of American history but does not affect the position of black people in American society today. 66%. By contrast, 70% of Democratic parents would prefer that their children learn in school that the legacy of slavery still affects the position of black people in American society today. On the topic of gender identity, 44% of Republicans would identify that children learn that whether someone is a boy or a girl is determined by sex at birth, while 49% of Democrats prefer children learn that someone can be a boy or girl even if that's different from their sex at birth. But regarding gender identity, 46% of Republicans and 28% of Democrats prefer that their children should not learn about the topic at all in school. At all. The divide is stark when it comes to the topics of sex education and also the U.S. position in the world, whether the U.S. is a leader for democracy or whether we are complicit in problems that are happening in the world. The partisan divide is real. Now, I imagine there's probably no one in this room who's surprised by these results, but doesn't it feel a little bit disconcerting that the divide is that sharp and growing sharper? And I hasten to add here, because this is really, really important, really, really important. We must remind ourselves that there is danger in conflating Unitarian Universalism and a specific partisan perspective. Ours is not a monolithic movement. And in the same way that we honor and respect a broad spectrum of diversity among us when it comes to religious traditions, it is just as important to recognize that we encompass a range of political expressions as well, and it doesn't necessarily fall into the binary Democratic or Republican choices, though those seem to be the only ones we're going to get. So we mustn't conflate the two. We mustn't think that we represent only one political point of view. But the question that still remains is, how do we collectively respond to data from such organizations like Pew Research Center that clearly indicate that Americans are more polarized today than in the past, and that the partisan divisions have grown over the decades? It's not an easy topic to even broach. I will say this, in terms of doing my research, I came across something that I found intriguing. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace has offered 7 research-backed ideas that they say can help reduce rampant partisanship. And I read this list and I thought, oh, we really should be talking about these things a lot. I think there's good things here. Here's 7 things you can do to bring down the partisanship. Call out your own party. Because when you critique your own group, that's critical to signaling what is acceptable within your group. Number 2, and this could be tough for some of us, avoid the bad jokes. No, seriously, avoid the bad jokes, because particularly dangerous are jokes that employ violent or dehumanizing rhetoric, even if it is just targeted to make the other side look ridiculous. Number 3, God help us, make social media kinder. Easier said than done, I know. But part of what they're getting at here is that you should use the tools that are available within social media so that if you see something that is hateful, report it. If you see something that is spreading false information, report it. I totally get if you've decided to back off of social media and you don't want to have any part of that, right? I totally get that. But if you're going to be there as a conscientious citizen and you see that stuff, report it. Use the tools. Number 4, try to highlight the median and downplay the fringes. Because here's the other truth to this. Despite the increased partisanship that we feel, there is broad, and I mean broad, agreement for the broad strokes on important issues in this country. Most people agree on what we should be doing in areas of reproductive justice. and on immigration, and on gun legislation. Despite what both parties tell us, the American public pretty much knows what they want to do on this, and it doesn't follow either side completely. Number 5, emphasize the disagreement within parties. This is a real danger and leads to more and more bipartisanship, because when we completely sort of demonize and make one side and we fall into this false binary choice, things get really, really hard. And it's difficult in either major political party to see where there's much room for disagreements within the parties. So we should do more to lift those up, to point out that not everyone on the progressive side agrees. There is disagreement about what we should do. And even though it feels, to me at least, like there's less and less visible disagreement in the GOP side, we should still lift that up when it happens. We should point out that not everyone believes these things. Number 6, try to help others imagine empathy. Storytelling is a really, really important part of how we're wired. It's part of our evolutionary process. And stories that encourage people to see the perspective of others can be very, very powerful. So when you're looking for something because you just got to say something, look for those stories that highlight the broadly reaching, perspective-engaging piece. And 7, this is a hard one, avoid repeating misinformation even if you're trying to debunk it. Because when we hear the misinformation, that's what actually sticks and gets remembered, right? So the best way to avoid deepening misinformation is not to quote what was said that was incorrect, but rather to simply state the alternative that is true, right? So if the misleading information out there is that, the sky is purple, don't rant and rave about the sky is not purple. That doesn't help. That just reinforces the idea for some people that maybe the sky is purple, right? It's better to just say calmly and succinctly, the sky is blue. The sky is purple. No, the sky is blue. 7 good ideas, right? It helps bring the bipartisanship down a bit. And as gargantuan as the task may at times seem, the need for that sort of approach is super, super important. But wait a minute, we've gotten off the point here, haven't we? Didn't I say we were talking about education? And yeah, there's some information about education then, but I want to point out that the partisanship is not only in that realm of education, but it's across the spectrum of issues. There is a counterpoint that is crucial to address here, which is many of us are simply exhausted. Are we not? We're just exhausted by the divisiveness and the polarization in our politics. We can understand it if you just want to bury your head in the sand and not pay attention. And yet, I think we're called to not allow that to be our primary mode of operation. Some may call for an education that could be considered ideologically neutral. So you hear this sometimes, right? So, well, let's not talk about anything that's divisive, right? If it's too hot a topic, let's just leave it alone. And I think, unfortunately, too many of us liberals fall into that because we are exhausted. And we don't want to have all of these conversations all the time. So we're like, let's just find the common ground all the time. The idea that there can be a position, let's say in education, without indoctrination, right? It's a common claim made by partisans against their opponents is they just don't want the indoctrination. That's not a new phenomenon. The debate about the difference between education and indoctrination has been going on since the emergence of public schooling in the mid-19th century. Hey, remember I told you we Unitarians had a stake in this game from the beginning? Let's talk about that. A prominent Unitarian was Horace Mann. Anyone ever heard of Horace Mann? Horace Mann was the first secretary of the Massachusetts Board of Education who was instrumental in the emergence of the common schools movement in the 1840s. So up until then, there was no public education whatsoever in this country, right? All education was completely private, was completely run by religion. This was the first experiment in universal education at public expense. So it was Horace Mann, a Unitarian, who learned from William Ellery Channing, right? William Ellery Channing was his minister, who was concerned about the growing prospect of sectarian religious divides and partisan politics that was happening in the school systems, and he said it was leading to indoctrination. And so he wanted a public education system that would be something other than indoctrination. Sounds great, right? And to a large part, he was successful. The reason we have public education in this country is because of the efforts of Horace Mann, and so much of his vision is in fact what we have. I mean, for good or ill, the education system that we have reflects Unitarian values. It really does, when it's working well. But I want to point out that Mann's solution was for teachers in schools to remain scrupulously nonpartisan and non-sectarian. So it sounds like he was arguing for that neutral ground idea, right? Avoiding the contentious areas, not really diving in. But if you dig a little deeper, it becomes really problematic because Mann also believed, and this is a quote, he believed children in public schools should be taught the ethical principles common across Christianity, but not those doctrines about which different sects disagreed. So he wanted to preach his view of the world in his educational system. That wasn't indoctrination, that was just truth. There's the dilemma for all of us, isn't it, right? Where is the line between what I believe to be true and what someone who doesn't believe that sees as indoctrination? Now, I'm going to give Mann the benefit of the doubt here because honestly, I don't know that there was any other alternative available to him in his day. There was the idea that education was so ingrained with the need to instill religious values, that was not going to be removed entirely. But Mann did a good job, I think, of trying to prevent the widely partisan religious indoctrination that were there. But his belief in the existence of God and the immortality of the soul, he thought they were universal truths. His compromise may have been the only one that we can conceive happening because there was a legal requirement at the time that all education include a religious education component. It was a legal requirement. There was no way to avoid it. But it does raise the question that I want to go back to, is there at all, really, ever, such a thing as an ideological, neutral perspective on education? Is there? Well, I turn to Henry Giroux. Giroux is considered a prominent figure in something called critical pedagogy. Critical pedagogy asserts that social justice and democracy are not distinct from the acts of teaching and learning. He would say that the goal in critical pedagogy, that the goal of education as a whole, is the emancipation from oppression through an awakening of the critical consciousness. That is the ultimate point of all education. The goal is emancipation from oppression through an awakening of a critical consciousness. When achieved, critical consciousness encourages individuals to effect change in their world through social critique and political action in order to self-actualize. What you see there is that is not ideologically neutral. There are values there that are being reinforced, and they are very aligned with what we as Unitarian Universalists say that we believe. I think it's important to note that I'm hard-pressed to find an example of an ideologically neutral value system. It doesn't exist. It can't exist because our values matter. There are things that do matter. There is truth and there is untruth. And we must be willing to stand for the truth. The defense of neutrality has always seemed to me, according to Giroux, to be the basis for a kind of fascist politics because it hides its code for not allowing people to understand the role that education plays ideologically in producing particular forms of knowledge, of power, of social values, of agency, of narratives about the world. It is impossible for education to be neutral. So those who argue that education should be neutral are really arguing for a version of education in which nobody is accountable. The people who produce the form of education become invisible because they are saying that it's neutral. So you can't identify the ideological processes or the politics or the modes of power at work. That is precisely what they want, Giroux says, because power at its worst makes itself invisible. And the notion that education is neutral is one way of people who have dominant power making it invisible and making propaganda itself incapable of being seen. There's some truth there. So, I want to dig even a little bit further into this assertion from critical pedagogy that education can never truly be ideologically neutral. And I'm going to suggest that we know that as Unitarian Universalists because religious education has been a part of our tradition from the beginning, and chances are it's what brought many of you here to begin with. Your first encounter with this congregation, for many of you, was because of the religious education program, and that has never been ideologically neutral. It takes a position. I believe in a very pragmatic way, religious education is the heart of Unitarian Universalism. I think ultimately you could say the only thing we do is religious education. One of my favorite quotes comes from Connie Goodbread. Connie currently serves as the Hope for Us Conflict Engagement Team Director at the UUA, and she has served in one capacity or another in every region of our association, in addition to serving as a credentialed religious educator. Here is her quote that I go back to over and over again. She says, "Everything we do is faith formation. Everything we teach is Unitarian Universalism. The congregation is the curriculum." That has expanded my definition of what constitutes religious education. Because it is, in fact, everything that we do. It is the sum total of all of our experiences. Yes, it is in the religious education programming for our children, yes. It is in the OWL curriculum. It is in the specific RE offerings. It is in the coming of age classes. It is in the curriculum. It is also, however, in our public worship. And it's in our small group ministries. It's in what happens in the hallways and the foyers before and after services. It's what happens in coffee hour when you're interacting with another. It's what happens when you're just having discussion, because everything we do is essentially about lifting up our values, isn't it? It's in our public witness and our social justice work, and I hate to tell you this, folks, but it's even in our governance. In the way that the various teams and the board and all the committees work together and interact with each other, whether we're doing it in a great way or a not so great way, it is teaching religious education to ourselves and our children. How we react, how we live, how we choose to be with one another is education. And it is the only thing we do. Education has been a major concern for our faith. Unitarians, Universalists, Unitarian Universalists, all of us. For so many congregations, as I said, it's what brings people through the doors for the very first time. It's some desire for some sort of what we have called traditionally a liberal religious education for our children. A liberal religious education. There are so many stories of folks who first meet because they have children in an RE program, and they end up developing connections, and they end up making lifelong friends, and they didn't intend it. They thought they were coming here for their kids, but they end up getting transformed themselves. It's not true of everyone. Not everyone has that experience, but it is a common theme for so many of us. And I know from my own personal UU journey, it wasn't the RE program that brought me to Unitarian Universalism initially, but it was definitely the RE program that truly offered me the connection I so desperately needed. And again, when I say RE, I don't necessarily mean a class designated as an RE class. The life of being part of a religious community is what I'm talking about. And folks, there's absolutely nothing value neutral there. It was the RE program that helped me discover a deeper spirituality, something that went beyond my head and intellectual musing and actually moved into my heart. It helped me to explore what it really meant to be part of a community of faith. I can go out and believe whatever I want all by myself without any of you people. But if I'm going to live in this society, I need you and you need me. That's what I learned in my UU congregation. In reflecting on my own journey of faith formation, I'm leaning more and more into the idea that my experience, the experience of being intertwined in a transformational process, has really been a movement. And I want to be really, really explicit about this, because I think we have traditionally stood on the ground that everything we do is liberal religious education, which is great. It's gotten us here. It's a liberal religious point of view. It means there's a way of thinking about things. There's a way of talking about things. There's a common vocabulary that we share. There are common interests. But folks, I also want to suggest that liberal education isn't enough. We need something more. And what I feel called to now is not the idea of a liberal education, but a commitment to a liberating education. What do I mean by that? I mean that I think we're due for a pedagogical shift from liberal theology as our primary divining rod towards a liberating theology. What does that mean? What is a liberating theology? What is a liberating education? And I am leaning very, very heavily here on the work of Paulo Freire in his groundbreaking work called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That is the foundation of the work of critical pedagogy. He wrote this book back in like 1968 or 69. It was first translated into English in the early 70s. The ultimate aim of Freire's philosophy was, and he's writing from a South American perspective. He was in Brazil, right? So much going on historically in Brazil at that time, and a sort of massive oppression of the masses. And Freire is there. The ultimate aim, of Freire's philosophy was to liberate individuals from oppressive systems and to offer a more just and equitable society. He believed that education had the power to break the chains of ignorance and empower people to become effective and active agents of social change. He sought to eradicate the hierarchical relationship, for example, between student and teacher. The idea that the teacher was the one with all the knowledge, and the children were all these empty vessels just waiting to be filled with all the expertise coming from the teacher. He tried to flatten the hierarchy, to suggest that in real education, it was the students themselves in collaboration with the teacher who were learning to free themselves. His work became influential in what would be the liberation theology movement that began in the 1970s within Catholicism, that emphasized that the liberation of the oppressed was preeminent. There was a phrase that came out of that time that said, God had a preferential option for the poor. What a beautiful idea. God has a preferential option for the poor. And it was an invitation within Catholicism to go back to the Gospels and to find in the words of Jesus a radical thought that we are here to free ourselves from oppression. One of the primary recommendations that came out of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change report a few years back, there was a report that came out called Widening the Circle of Concern that was intended to try to give us a little bit of a roadmap as a movement for where we need to go. And one of the primary calls of that report is that Unitarian Universalists need to articulate a liberation theology that works for Unitarian Universalism. I would imagine that such a liberation theology would be characterized by a few things. And these are ideas borrowed from Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So I'll list these really, really quickly. A liberating education encourages learners to become critically aware of their social reality and question existing power structures and injustices. The critical consciousness empowers students to identify and challenge oppressive systems, leading to both personal and social transformation. Secondly, a liberating education must be committed to dialogue because this has to be a reciprocal process. Dialogue occurs between educators and learners. This requires not only mutual respect, but genuine power sharing that flattens the hierarchy. These methods foster active participation by all participants and shape the learning experience, enhancing problem-solving skills. And a third characteristics of what I hope would be our liberating education, our liberating theology, would be that it has to be tangible. It has to be practical. It has to actually move something. It has to make a difference. It's vital. A liberating education must bridge the gap between the theoretical and the practical. We can't be in our heads all the time, ruminating about the ways to change the world just by talking. Our faith needs our works. The two need to go hand in hand. A liberating education would inspire us to action and call us each to be change makers. In essence, it is active. It is not passive. Now, you may have sat with me through this much, and you may be going, okay, but here's the problem. You haven't given us any specifics. There hasn't been any detail here. I haven't laid out the perfect curriculum that's going to solve the problem. I haven't laid out the perfect order of business that's going to make all of this work. And the reason is because all of the stuff about curriculum, about finding exactly the right program or the right structure, is distracting us from the real problem. The problem is not curriculum. Content and structure are important, but they must emerge from the lived experience of the participants. And that needs an unapologetic preference for being rooted in the lives of those who are in the room, learning from them, learning from us, because who's in the room? It's us. That's the only way to foster deep relevance and the possibility of a transformative experience. This is exactly the point, because whatever the shortcomings of our current educational pedagogy, it is not lack of curriculum or lack of structure or lack of key performance indicators that account for our dissatisfaction with what's going on. I truly believe that if you query professional educators and you ask them about the frequency and the depth of the professional development they receive, they will report that they already invest a lot of time and energy into those areas. That's not where the problem is. Some indeed may want more, they may want further resources, but fundamentally that's not their most pressing concern. Their most pressing concern is what is the actual purpose of education. Why are we here? Why are we here? Could it be that the answer is to liberate? And not to liberate others. That's another mistake we make. This is not a pedagogy for the oppressed. It's a pedagogy of the oppressed. The oppressed must claim their power. Now, you may be saying, but I'm not oppressed, right? Depending on your identity, you may go, well, maybe you're like me. You're a white, cisgendered male who comes from a basically middle-class background. I'm more aligned with, unfortunately, the oppressor than I am with the oppressed. And there's a moment that happens within our liberal communities where we go, I don't want to hear about that anymore because it makes me feel uncomfortable because you're reminding me that I'm part of a system where I'm culpable and I am affected and I am an oppressor. But friends, there is good news here. This is not only for the oppressed, this is for those of us who are oppressors, whether intentionally or whether because we are in a system that has participated in oppression. This is not freeing other people, this is freeing yourselves. This is learning about your own oppression and learning a way to be free from it. If we're doing it for them, it'll never work. If we're doing it because our liberation is bound up in theirs, then there's work to do. So I don't know. I don't know where we're going as Unitarian Universalists as a whole. But I would hope that one possibility is a liberating education based in a liberating theology, because oppression is the thing that we are really fighting. Oppression as it impacts everyone, including ourselves. What if this is the time for us to embody what was the heart of Paulo Freire's educational philosophy? The belief that education should be liberating rather than oppressive. Can you imagine moving beyond the traditional banking model of education that he talked about, where everyone is just passively receiving and instead engaged in their own transformation? What if, friends, this is the time when we will look back and we go, that's when we made a change. That's when we made the pivot. We chose to center mutual respect. We chose to center collaboration. We chose to center critical thinking, because a liberating education would transform us all. And I don't know about you, but I think transformation is in order. Amen.
Thank you, Charles. Beautiful. Just a little bit of house cleaning with this last song before we sing. Yes, I know we're mourning the drum set, but Tim, in his amazing talents, is going to use some of the acoustic hand percussion because he's awesome. And it's going to be good. But real quick, Alex, can you go ahead 2 slides or 3, any one of the choruses at the end? So yeah, can you go, oh yeah, this one is fine. So see at the end there, sing, we're going to pick up right into the next spot. So if you advance to the next slide, Alex, the pickup you got to do. These are written as separate measures, but we're not doing it like, you don't need to know how to read music, but all that say, there's a little delay with it, but Alex is going to get right on when we're holding that note at the end. Could you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. Spirit says sing, Spirit says sing. You got right, exactly. See, so these are written like they are not like that, they're elided. And then can you go to the last slide, Alex, just real quick? This is a great song, this is awesome, but this is the problem you get when you do have elided or dovetailed phrases. Again, more terms you do not need to know, but when a phrase ends where it begins, how do you end it? We can't end on this, do. So there's this little codetta, this last line here, which does appear in the hymnal. Here it's written out as just one extra measure on the extra line on the bottom. So same thing here, the end of the second to last line. Spirit says do, and I'll play a chord. 1, 2. Spirit says do. So you're just gonna wait. I'm gonna play, give you a chord for that last one. in the times we've done this, understandably so, that's a tricky ending to line up. So I'm going to be very clear, and then that's where I said, if you're done, we're just doing that 2-4, okay? And then we're going to do this true shuffle style, and that's how it's written in the hymnal here with the soft and the loud. Can you, anytime we have this whole part, this is the second. Spirit says do, get real quiet, start soft and get louder. That's the real build of this style, this spiritual, which is the shuffle, and that section when it says do, Spirit says do. And it's all there, it ends with do, but it says here you can really choose any verb of your choice. Liberate, educate, you gotta sleep when the Spirit says sleep, whatever you want. And there is an option, the Raffi recording does this, I know, if you don't wanna say, when the Spirit says do, you gotta do, oh Lord. Instead of oh Lord, you could say do right around or do all around. You gotta sing all around, and you would all around or sing yes you do. I know, like I said, the Raffi recording does that, so that is an atheist version where we don't mention Lord. But speaking of verbs, however you are comfortable, seated, standing, wherever you'd like.
That's some energy to leave this place on, right? That's so great. Thank you for everything this morning. Thank you for allowing me to cram a 2-hour sermon into 45 minutes. I end this morning with this benediction. Paulo Freire says, "My philosophical conviction is that we did not come to keep the world as it is. We came to the world in order to remake the world. We have to change reality. Friends, let's be about that, shall we? Let's remake the world, let's change reality, and may we proclaim it's all on to liberation. Go in peace.